right? So we get nutrients from it, right? So there are two types of nutrients we get from our food, okay? So we get what are called macronutrients, okay? Otherwise known as your macros. What are macronutrients, guys? So macronutrients are nutrients we consume typically in gram to 100 gram quantities, right? So that would include carbohydrates, proteins, and fats, right? We typically consume these in large quantities, relatively large quantities, sometimes hundreds of grams a day. And then we've got micronutrients, which are typically found in very small quantities, milligrams, sometimes even micrograms. So this will include vitamins, minerals, things like that, okay? So humans can, right, so there are a couple of different types of organisms on this planet that when it comes to getting energy to sustain the organism. So there are, broadly, we can be broken into two categories, autotrophs and heterotrophs, okay? What are autotrophs? So anything that is photosynthetic would be an autotroph. They can generate all of the energy and nutrients they need from resources in the ground plus the energy of the sun through photosynthesis. Right, so that would be plants. Okay. And then heterotrophs would include animals. There are three categories of heterotrophs. Okay? Three categories of heterotrophs would be herbivore, carnivore, and then what's the third category?
Omnivore.
Omnivore. Okay. What's the difference between the three categories?
Herbivores eat plants, carnivores eat meat, and omnivores eat both.
Both, right. So what would be an example of an herbivore? Cows, right? So cows and other ruminant animals are very efficient at eating grass and other types of things, breaking them down in their extremely complex stomachs and getting all of the nutrients they can get from them. What would be an example of a carnivore? An animal that's solely designed to eat meat.
Do lions eat?
Yeah, big cats, all right? So lions, tigers, pumas, things like that, right? And then what would be some examples of omnivores?
Humans.
Humans and most primates are omnivores, right? So what's one of the things that lets humans know that we are designed to be omnivores? Our dentition, right? Mainly our teeth, right? So what do we got in the back of our mouth? Molars. Molars are designed to do what?
Chew.
Crush plant material. The teeth on the front are designed to like cut up and tear. So we got canines, we got incisors, and all of that, right? So now you will find humans who are herbivorous. You will find humans that are almost exclusively carnivorous, right? But the vast majority of humans are omnivorous, and one can make the argument that we typically do best when we stick to an omnivorous diet, right? There is a lot of age to that, okay? So, why do we have a digestive system, right? We have a digestive system because number one, we need to get energy and nutrients from our food. If we just needed energy, we could just eat cotton candy and we would be good to go. If we just needed nutrients, we could just pop a couple of multivitamins and we're good to go. We need both. But we eat what are called complex foodstuffs, right? We eat a sandwich or a burrito or a hamburger or something like that, right? And so what are we eating? We're eating things that are made up of large macromolecules, right? So large poly chains of carbohydrates, chains of amino acids, and lipids, right? Our cells can only uptake what? They can only uptake individual units, right? So our cells can only take up what are called monomers, right? So our cells can take up an individual amino acid, an individual unit of glucose, or an individual fatty acid, right? But that's not what we're eating, right? We're eating a sandwich, right? So what do we have to do? We have to So our digestive system intakes, breaks down, absorbs, and then excretes what's left over. Okay? So where does the digestive phase begin? So the digestive phase begins with what's called the cephalic phase. Okay? So in the cephalic phase, right? So first thing that starts happening, like for example, you go to like Krispy Kreme, right? You can smell like everything going on in Krispy Kreme. You start thinking about the donut that you're about to eat. What starts to happen? You got salivary glands. What are the salivary glands doing? They're creating a chemical called amylase, which breaks down amylose, which is starch, right? So the cephalic phase kind of starts really with the moment you start thinking about food, right? So you start thinking about food, gastric juices start getting going, salivation starts getting going, right? You're preparing your digestive system for the fact that I'm about to eat food, right? Then you have ingestion, okay? What do? You take the food, right? You bite into it, tear off individual pieces of it, right? Chew it up into small bits, and then what do? You swallow it, right? So it goes down the esophagus, and then it enters into the stomach where we start. So at this point, we've done mostly mechanical digestion, but we've done a small amount. If you're eating anything with carbohydrate in it, you've done a small amount of chemical digestion. We then hit the stomach, and in the stomach, we're doing both mechanical and chemical digestion. So our stomach has got a longitudinal layer, a transverse layer, and an oblique layer of muscle, okay? So that allows the stomach to, right, mish and mash and shake it up, turbinate it, until it becomes a liquidy paste called chyle. C-H-Y-L-E, not like your angry boyfriend that, punch the walls, right, spelled differently, okay? Inside of your stomach, you got these folds called rugae. Okay. So that rugae's job is to allow the stomach to expand, kind of like what happens to a cactus, a barrel cactus, when it's dehydrated. Kind of looks like an accordion, right? And then it fills up with water. It almost looks like a watermelon. Same kind of thing about the stomach. So our stomach is able to expand massively to accommodate large amounts of food at a time. Okay. So we take the food, right, the complex food stuff, we get into our stomach, and we mash it up into a paste called chyle. And then from there, it gets released into the first 10 inches of the small intestine called the duodenum. Duodenum or duodenum, depending on which part of the English-speaking world you're from. Both are grammatically correct. So in the duodenum, you're going to release other gastric juices and other digestive enzymes. So the gallbladder is going to release bile, which helps emulsify fat. That takes a big ball of fat and breaks it down into small globules. And then your pancreas is going to release a whole cocktail of enzymatic juices. So pancreatic juices, which include proteases, which break down proteins, lipases, which break down fat, right, and things like sucrose. So if you ever see the prefix or the suffix ASE, what does that mean? That's an enzyme, right? So for example, sucrase is the enzyme which breaks down sucrose, which is table sugar, okay? So your pancreas and your gallbladder are going to release all sorts of enzymatic juices, including bicarbonate, which is going to neutralize that high stomach acid. So at this point, you're finally finishing up all of the digestion. Okay. Now you get to the second part of the small intestine, which is the ileum, and then the final part, which is the jejunum. In the ileum and jejunum, you've now done the chemical digestion, and now what do you now have? You've now taken your complex food stuff, and what have you broken down into? Individual monomers of amino acids, carbohydrates, and lipids, okay? Now, what can happen? Now you can absorb it through the gut wall, okay? So here you have what are called villi, okay? So all throughout your intestines, you got these little finger-like projections called villi. On each villi, guess what you will find? Microvilli, right? So this is an individual microvilli right here. What does this do? This drastically increases surface area, okay? So your intestines is a giant tube, okay? So inside of the tube, you've got all these tiny little finger-like projections that are wiggling, right? And then your intestines are doing this. So what is it doing? It's taking that liquid and it's shaking it up like a snow globe, okay? What does that do? Right, so when you turbinate it like that, when you shake it up like that, it gets on all 360-degree surface. What do? You get massive amounts of surface area, which drastically increases absorption. You got about 3 meters of intestines. How long is 3 meters, guys? For everyone that didn't grow up in a metric speaking. It's about 9 feet. That's about 9 feet of intestines. If you were to take your 9 feet of intestines and smooth it out to paper thin, it would be enough to cover this room. That's how much surface area there is. So it drastically increases absorption, okay? So, all right, so mechanical and chemical digestion, mechanical and chemical digestion, chemical digestion, absorption, okay? So it's gonna go through the ileum and jejunum, and then it's gonna get, so first part is duodenum, second part is jejunum, and then the third part is the ileum. Then you'll get to what's called the ileocecal valve, at which point you'll go into the large intestine. So the small intestine is called small because of it's smaller in diameter, longer in length. The large intestine is larger in diameter, but significantly shorter in length. Your small intestines are about 3 meters. Your large intestine is about 1 meter long, okay? Once you get into the large intestine, your primary priority is making solid waste, right? So you're getting rid of whatever's left over. To do that, you need to get the fluid and electrolyte balance right. What happens if you take too much water out of the bulk waste? You know, with constipation, you can't move the bulk waste through the system. What happens if you don't take enough water out of the bulk waste?
Diarrhea.
You end up with diarrhea, right? So it's a delicate balance to get it right. This is why, for example, if you oh, that's not good. So, like, for example, you go talk to your doctor, like, I'm having constipation issues. One of the first things the doctor will say is, well, all right, how much water are you drinking? Right? So they'll say, drink more water, things like that, okay? So you've got the ileum, you got the cecum, which is the first part of the small intestine, or large intestine. You got the ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid colon, rectum, and then anus, okay? So the rectum is the final end, and then the anus is just simply the opening. Inside of your rectum and anus, you've got 2 sphincters. What's a sphincter again, guys? Circular muscle, okay? So you got 2 sphincters inside of your rectum. The first one is involuntary. Once fecal matter gets close to it, what happens? It reflexively opens up. And then you have another one about 1.5 inches, 2 inches down, which is voluntary, right? You learn how to control that when you're about 1.5 years old. We call that potty training, okay? So food comes in, okay? So mechanical and chemical digestion, chemical digestion, absorption, forming bulk waste, and then we excrete the bulk waste that comes out at the other end, okay? Let's talk about a few things. So let's talk about gallbladder, okay? What's the gallbladder's function? Its sole function is to store bile. It does not make bile. Bile is made in your liver. It is not made in your gallbladder. Your gallbladder just simply stores it. So then we got our pancreas. The pancreas' main job is to secrete all sorts of enzymatic enzymes to help break down our nutrients, and then also produces the chemicals that regulate our blood sugar. And then we got our kidney. Our kidney does all sorts of stuff when I'm involved in digestion and metabolism. We'll talk more about that when we get into the digestive system in lecture. You could literally take several semesters of courses just covering all of the things that the liver is doing. Literally, you can take like 5 or 6 biochemistry classes and you're just still covering what's going on in the liver. Right? That's how much complex stuff that's going on in there. Questions on any of this stuff? No? One last thing. So right here, this green thing. What's this green thing here? So we talked about the lymphatic system. It's got specialized lymphatic vessels called lacteals. Right? So fat is, because of its chemical structure and its size, it can't be absorbed through the capillaries inside of our small intestine, so it first has to go into lacteals, right? Then it'll eventually make its way into the subclavian, and then into the vena cava, then it'll go through the aorta, and then from the aorta, then go to the liver, and then the liver it's modified, and then it can be delivered to the body. Right? So fat first has to come in through there. We call it lacteals because when we first dissected and opened them up, this milky white substance would come out because that was fat. Okay? Questions on any of this material? No? Okay. One more thing, we're going to talk real quick about a little bit about the respiratory system, and then we will take care of that. Okay.